losing a little hair up here, by the way, too. All right, this question is going to be open to the entire panel, but as fellow historians, this is the one I chose. Themes 8 and 9 touch on political economy, borders, and boundaries, respectively. But there are obvious pitfalls in research that the chapters need to avoid. Similarly, are there issues that you believe to be especially suited to Honors in Action project?
I heard historian, so I'll jump right in. Usually I just copy whatever Benny says because she's, I think, a better historian than I am, but I'll jump right in on this one. On the question about which research to use, and a particularly spurious research, I think one of the things that a good chapter should learn to do through the Honors in Action project is to figure out which sources are credible and which sources aren't credible. And you kind of have to balance that with wanting to hear from as many different viewpoints as you possibly can. I thought, for example, with the theme of borders and boundaries, lots of us who would look at that topic are inevitably going to deal with questions of immigration and are going to deal with questions of national and international and economic borders and boundaries. And I would say there's a tendency sometimes to kind of read two sources and then just split the difference right down the middle, when in reality what we're supposed to be doing as scholars is sort of figuring out which sources are more credible than others, which ones are more believable, which ones are more engaged with the scholarship. And if you went to a field of historians or sociologists or political scientists and said, would this stand up at a conference of historians, some research probably wouldn't, some research probably would. So I think it's probably a good idea to start as kind of broad as you can, hear from lots of different viewpoints. But then if you find evidence that this viewpoint is kind of especially ideologically driven, or that this viewpoint is kind of being dishonest with basic facts, you might hear it and it might influence your project, but those are the ones you kind of want to throw away as you move towards the end so that you can get to those really good, really, I think, academic-oriented sources. Just my 2 cents, though.
That's a lot of 2 cents. I think the best advice that I would give all of you is, and you've heard this before, and maybe you don't really take it serious, but go meet your librarian. Work with those librarians. They have an incredible amount of integrity when it comes to directing you to really good sources. So that would be the first advice I would give you, is get the sources from your librarians. The next advice I would give you is, if you come across, if you have a particular viewpoint, and then you come across a source that does not agree with your viewpoint, don't discard it. Have some intellectual honesty and look at it from the other side. So I think it's important to get some help to learn what a good research tool is, what a good intellectual document is. But also be sure that you address it from a variety of viewpoints.
Would you like to respond to this? Would you have a thought on it?
Well, yes, first, again, Molly, I'd like to remind you, Odessa is pretty exotic. You said I went from someplace exotic. If Fort Worth is where the West begins, Odessa is where the Wild West begins. Nonetheless, okay, yes, I would tend to agree that the individuals on the panel are certainly much more qualified than I am, but with regard to the research, this may be kind of cutting corners a little bit. Sometimes I would look at, when I had something similar, I would look at the conclusion I would want to draw, and I would try to work backward from that. And sometimes you discover when you're working backward from that your conclusion is wrong, and so don't be afraid to change it. But that's something that often worked for me. Try again, at the same time, try to avoid forcing a conclusion as well. In other words, this is what I want the research to say, and it doesn't say that. Keep that in mind also.
Okay, just one quick follow-up, because a lot of chapters, of course, are still in the process of attempting to discover what their projects might be or where they're going to proceed. So are there any issues, anything in the news, in your own field, that you've read or seen and you said, wow, that would make a great honors in action research topic and project? Is there anything that has struck any of you? I mean, we're heavy in political season now, so I thought
We don't want to give them all the good ideas. They might beat our chapters
the
in
one,
international.
your B list.
Let me tell you a little bit about my original research. It has nothing to do with my chapter here. I've always been very fascinated by how we dislike each other. You know, we always say, oh, we really like each other, but we have a lot of us and them. And that's interested me for a long time. And long before they became terrorists and were evil people, I had noticed that Middle Easterners were seen either in a very exotic way or in a very, we were very frightened of them. And so that's what I basically did my research with. And then the first thing in your research, I think you have to do a little bit of, at least for history, you have to do a little bit of a historiography and find out what are the materials that are out there. And it didn't take me long to figure out that the book that I needed to start with was Edward Said's Orientalism. It taught me a great deal about how the West and Americans see the Middle East. So I think a chapter should find something that they're really interested in. Because you're going to invest time and energy in this if you're going to, really learn something from it. So pick something that really appeals to you. Okay,
thank you. Now we'll pick on the scientists and mathematicians on the panel. And it struck me, and it struck me particularly about theme 6, which if you have your honors study guide, is Frontiers of Temporal and Spatial Physics. And as an English professor, I began to look through the list of sources, and I realized, to my shock, I had read 3 of them. And I don't read books with equations in them. If I see an equation, I close it. And so, I'm not endorsing that. But that theme offers as background reading 4 books that are directed to a general audience and which actually contain few, if any, equations. Further, the sample project is really an exercise in literary criticism, which again appealed to me but seemed to have little to do directly with the physics or the mathematics. And so my question here is, if we do have chapters who are interested in pursuing a project or research in the hard sciences or the mathematics, what advice would you have? And are there sources that you could direct them to?
Answer this question. Well, I'll let you start the answer. Can you hear me? From a scientific perspective, I know, right? From a scientific perspective, so before I became a professor, I was a research scientist at UTMB doing different bacterial pathogenesis and genetics. And one thing that caught my attention at the International Honors Institute is one of our keynote speakers. And for those of you that were there, I'm talking about Dr. Nina Tandon. Incredible woman, has done a billion things, has a billion degrees. But what she's focusing on is basically tissue and genetic engineering, where they are using bioreactors to grow tissues and even human cells in these special liquid-filled chambers that simulate conditions in the human body. And what she showed me blew my mind. It wasn't just about looking for therapies and things of that nature, but people using this process to make art. I never thought of living tissue as art. I just thought of it as a therapy. That really opened my mind. So regarding to looking seriously at the hard sciences, the first most important thing to do is learn the basics. So if there's resources, references in the honors program guide, read those first. Get the basics down. If you don't understand the basics, get assistance. Okay? Find professors or instructors that perhaps that's their background. Maybe they can give you some insight and clarity into reading some of the basic literature. And if you want to go beyond that, you then have to be more critical and more selective as to what are the researches you're looking at, because when you publish scientific journal articles, there are a million different types of journals, and they're all tiered at different levels. So I would suggest looking at those specific journal titles that are towards the top of the tiering system, such as Science and Nature, journals of that nature. So my advice in order would be to learn the basics first. What you don't understand from those basics, get assistance from experts or people that are actively working and contributing to that field, such as Dr. Tandon, for example. And then start being more critical and more selective as you go to look in more depth at that topic or issue, whether it's spatial physics or other science areas, and to specifically focus on some of the more high-tiered journals, because those are critically analyzed by experts in the field. Not anybody can publish in Nature. Not anybody, for example, will be admitted to a science publication. But those are strongly peer-reviewed, critically analyzed, and if the publication occurs in that journal, there's something significant that's to be said for that specific article.
I would say that one of the boundaries that is really artificial that we have set up is the idea that if it has an equation, if it says math anywhere in the course description, some people think it's not for them. I would ask you all, maybe that's an area to explore, because the rest of the world doesn't quite do that to the extent that we do. They don't shy away from it any more than they shy away from languages. We all know that the rest of the world learns a lot more languages than we do. And we know we ought to be studying more languages. Well, math is a language, guys. Don't shy away from it. Give it a little bit of a chance, at least. And also, something to explore is the differences between other countries and our own country, and what it can do to our civilization, our economy, our freedom, if we don't communicate with the rest of the world in that language.
Let me reiterate what the panelists have been telling you. Math, and I understand, Bo, I mean, I'm the same way, I'm like the plague, but success in math is such a good predictor for success in any other subject area that you want to study. So just keep that in mind. Doesn't mean you have to like it, major in it, do all that well in it, but success in math does translate into success in everything else, including the humanities and social sciences and so forth, okay? All right, along those lines, and I'm going to ask you a question that's probably all of us who are instructors battle with this. The rubric, the Honors in Action rubric, examines the extent to which the chapter's research activities clearly allow participants to develop critical thinking skills. Okay. How do you define critical thinking or critical thinking skills? And can you emphasize two or three important skills along those lines? This is open to the entire panel.
It probably would have been better to go to somebody else, but I had a thought on this, so I'm going to say it, and then you'll hear the good stuff. Critical thinking skills are skills that enable you to break apart a huge, complex problem that may have nothing to do with math into pieces. You break the problem up into pieces in whatever field you're looking at that are more manageable and that you can get a grasp on. And I think the three most important critical thinking skills are organizing, evaluating, and then putting the pieces back together.
I would just add really quickly, with respect to our honors and action projects and how critical thinking ties into those projects, I think if you ask me, what is a critical thinker able to do, it's quite a few things, but particularly someone who's a critical thinker is able to not just memorize information, but connect it to larger issues. One of the great things about honors and action is that you can kind of start broad and just think about and research frontiers and the spirit of exploration as a broad topic and then narrow it down. It's important, to me at least, that as the project narrows in focus, you don't lose the connection with the larger topic. And I think a critical thinker is able to do that because you're not just sort of saying, here's information that I've mastered. You're taking it and connecting it to particular issues, hopefully that tie back to the honors and action topic. So definitely that. And then I think also just distinguishing between good information, bad information, the best information. If you're a critical thinker, you're able to look at a piece of information and understand that maybe you don't necessarily agree with it, maybe you do agree with it, but you're able to kind of step back from your own opinions and just analyze it for what it's saying. And hopefully our projects will be able to do that as well.
When your chapter gets to the point where you're discussing and your members start saying, why is that? That's when you start with your critical thinking. When you're more interested in why something is happening, whatever your topic is, whatever you select, instead of just, well, when did this happen and how did this happen? And it becomes a second nature to you that you really want to, break down the pieces, as Nancy said, but then really get to what are the questions that we really want to find out that aren't necessarily right here in front of me. And I think and your chapter will get there if you will keep talking about things. At least we hope so.
And just to add to what my fellow scholars have been mentioning, also, obviously you have to do your homework first to have a foundation of knowledge to start critical thinking and those processes. And then whatever topic, issue you're looking at, basically assess, based off of the knowledge that you've accumulated at that point, what is known and understood, and then ask why and find out what do we not know, what are the gaps in the information, where are the holes, where are the areas where we don't really understand something. And that's typically where you may find the seeding to develop an honors and action project is the gaps in the information and the knowledge. But in order to find those gaps and to critically think, you must have a basic understanding of the issue or the topic that you're studying. And that's going to come from work and research and really delving in, finding experts, finding high quality literature to give you a good foundation to execute your critical thinking processes.
Okay, thank you. We have time for a few questions that students and advisors have sent in via text. And so if you would, we're going to finish up in about 5 minutes. So let me read the question. Please answer if you feel like you're able to. One question reads this. What tools have you developed in your position, either as faculty, scholars, or advisors, to help Phi Theta Kappa students become scholars on their own and become successful in academic careers?
I think one of the great things about our chapters is that we build relationships, and in some sense, Phi Theta Kappans are the best politicians because we know a lot of people, but we also need a lot of people on campus. So when I think about how our chapters and our chapter members go about putting together these projects, a lot of the resources aren't like a source or a book or something like that. They're people, because there are people you can interview. There are also people who can help you go and find information. Dr. Abels talked about librarians, right, which are a huge resource. But I think an Honors in Action project where you use the kind of if you want to say social and political capital that your chapter has developed through those college projects, to say, we really need to know about this subject and you have experience in it. Could you spend an hour with our chapter and kind of go over it? Many of the topics and the sub-themes for the honor study topic, I think, require interdisciplinary nature. So it's like, I'm a historian, but if I need to know about math, I'm going to have to come and ask you. You know what I mean? So use those relationships that you have on campus.
Okay. Maybe we have time for just one more.
Okay, folks, let's take a look at this one. We're talking about theme 8, is political economy. Is that theme, just in this the entire panel, is that theme defined more by ideology or by the funding? What do you think? That should kill the rest of this.
Well, I think that's where the analysis comes in for yourself, and you have to be honest with yourself and ask, is this an ideology that I want to follow, or is this really something that I want to know and learn a very different viewpoint? Becoming a scholar means you're open to ideas. You're at least willing to weigh them. And if you're too emotionally attached to a view, then maybe you're not looking at this very critically.
I think that what we will do now is, first of all, thank our panelists for all of your leadership and what we'll try to do is, if we are able to, we will try to respond in private to some of these questions. I'll talk to the panelists and we'll try to get together. And if you send in a question, we will try at least to offer you some response to that question. Thank you again.
Faculty, scholars, and facilitators, will you please come to the front of the stage? Yes, ma'am. On behalf of the Texas region, we would like to thank you for joining us today and for your continued support of the Texas region.
Writing in January, right? So it's come late in the fall when you start writing, you're gonna be like, what did we do in April? Didn't we have a meeting? Who was there? What did we discuss? Keeping all of that together is going to help you in the long run. So try to journal. And also make sure that you have some objectives set so you know where you're going in this process. So there you have it. Step 1, read. Read the Honors Program Guide and select a theme. Good luck.